All right. Should we start tackling the top topics, or should we give a little bit more time for voting? This is the first time I'm moderating, so I'm trying to figure. All right. Let's start. Just an update. Most voted item is for Alert Manager from Josh. Query screenshots notification in Alert Manager. However, Josh notes that Alert Manager has like a ton of other higher priority items, and this is not that important. So basically, we'll just drop it until the Alert Manager folks want to put it back in again. It's been kind of stagnating for a while. All right, cool. Also, folks, please add yourself to the attendees list. Basically it's right here. I'm gonna put the link as well. So let me copy the one about screenshots and then we can remove it. Yeah. Josh notes that this is not very imminent right now. We'll revisit and that's important. Okay. Now that that is done, the next one has 7 votes, which is proposed to set an expected timeline for 4.0 at 2 years from now. This is from Cryo. We do have Cryo on the call.
As the title says, dollar subject. I don't know. That's it, yes. I'm looking forward to your letters.
Yeah, anybody else have any thoughts? Owen?
I would say if you want it to actually be 2 years from now, set the deadline at 1 year, and then it will be 2 years.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
We have other hands. I think Dion is the next one, and then Jan.
Yeah, I wouldn't set a timeline because it will either be too early or too late if he said something now. I think version 3 was meant to educate people that a major version bump is nothing bad, and that kind of worked. And so we could even sneak in like horrific fundamental changes in version 4 and nobody will notice. Whatever, right? I think we should just we should create. I already used the breaking label on 2 issues. So I think we should just mark issues that would require version 4 to be properly launched. Could be behind the feature flag right now, but to remove the feature flag, or sometimes it's so fundamental that you cannot even do that. And so I would propose we introduce a GitHub tag. Is it called tag or label, whatever? And then we can just count. And if we see, okay, we have like 2 gazillion things we want, then let's go for it.
Same thing I was going to propose.
Yeah, I agree with the same thing. I don't think we should set a deadline. 7 years is too long. But again, I think it kind of turned out fine. I think we should kind of do it when we have a good reason to do it. And I think 3.0, we had a good reason to do it. Yeah, if there's breaking changes, if there's a new storage engine, if there's something amazing to kind of add to V4, and we believe that we need a V4, but let's cut it then.
So yeah, just to be explicit, the idea is then you sort of look at what the breaking bugs are, and if we'll just basically get a sense of momentum and like, okay, we've built up a number of things that would justify it, and just sort of do it as needed.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems fine.
But it doesn't need to be for breaking only. If we have a very cool, important feature, like potentially a new query engine, that's like 10 times slower memory, or if a new storage engine, I think we can also kind of do a 4.0 for the marketing and also to kind of highlight this thing. But in absence of those major things that we want to break or highlight, I think it doesn't make sense to put a deadline. Cool.
Sounds like there's something to vote on.
Yeah, let's have a consensus. Consensus. We will. Invest. We can change off. Do we? So yeah, call for consensus. We will do a V4 .0 release when there are enough breaking changes or important major changes we want to highlight, but no deadline for it. Cool. Anyone against? No. Okay, that's a quick one. All right, we'll move to the next one, which has, let me see if there's anything else with 7 votes. Oh, there is one with 7 votes, which is approaches for supporting delta metrics in Prometheus.
Sorry, real quick, maybe should we jot down for the previous topic what label to use, or are we gonna freehand that?
Leon, you have been doing a lot of these bug scrubs. Do you have a preference?
I think I don't have any preference. You just should have one label and only exactly one, not 0, not 2. So, I mean, if somebody has a preference, speak up now and you will be the one creating the label. But yeah, is somebody speaking up?
Let's use what we have and use the breaking label.
I mean, rename it, or I think it should have a V4 or something, right? I think the breaking was originally meant to just mark a pull request that we might not merge because it's breaking. I was surprised to have this label there. Did we? I don't know.
I think the issue with V4 is then we mark something V4, it's not going to get done, and then it'll forever have the V4 label because nobody cleans it up, and we're releasing V6, and somebody's like, why isn't this in V4?
Okay, that's a good point. So
well,
then
I think that's why we have I think that's why it's good to have a consensus around this, is that we recognize that there will be this tag to look at, and if we're consistent about it, V4, V5, V6 we'll do the same procedure.
I mean, so the proposal is now, let's just use the breaking label for changes that we thrive to go to the next major release.
I just want to surface the GitHub has milestones that are easy to bump along, and that's a little more programmatic than adding the letter V4 to a label. I think breaking is a good tag to have, but if we want to start planning which features, which PRs and which features go in which release, then we can start using milestones, and those are a lot cleaner.
Okay, but we use those once we get into like concrete.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Then it's like, okay, this is going to be bumped to the major one. This one can go in the next minor release, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
And I can help set that up if that's a thing that needs somebody to set up.
Yeah, probably not right now. We have exactly 2 issues with the breaking label, but maybe we find more now. That
sounds good.
One second. If somebody can help me take notes, that would be great. We don't have a lot of breaking issues, but when we do, we will transition to using milestones. All right. Do we need a consensus for this? I'm gonna assume no. All right. The next topic is from Owen, supporting delta metrics in Prometheus. Owen, go for it.
Yeah. So there's currently a form of delta support that was merged into Prometheus, basically converting things to cumulative. Deltas driven by OTel existing, that sort of thing. There exists other Prometheus compatible backends that need not be named, where that approach is not going to work. And an alternative approach will need to be found in order to support Delta. And so this raises the question, should said alternative projects come up with their own thing, or is there interest in Prometheus to support Delta as a native metric type, just a thing you can send in and either the query engine knows what to do or some other form of adaptation for queries to make the results make sense? Is this a thing that Prometheus wants to explore? Yeah.
Go for it, Beyond. Sorry.
Okay, just for context, could you explain what you said it's already merged in Prometheus, right? Yeah, so
Yes.
the delta to cumulative converter, right?
Yep.
How is, like, just for the people who don't know, how does that work, and why doesn't it work for all the other, like, or for that one backend?
It doesn't work for that one backend. If you
first explain what it does, so otherwise we cannot even understand what.
My understanding is that it collects the that it basically calculates the cumulative value as the deltas come in and then writes them as cumulative values to the TSDB. And my understanding is that that doesn't work in a system where you may have multiple instances that each are receiving different delta values and none of them can calculate the cumulative correctly. Jesus, correct me if I'm wrong about any of that. Okay, great.
You got it right.
Okay, so it's a distribution problem, essentially. Okay.
Yes, it's a distribution problem.
The other question I would have, just to understand the context, what would a native solution look like?
Writing delta values to the TSDB as is, and then at query time, you can do a sum over time if you want the cumulative, that sort of thing. Just storing them as gauges is the sort of equivalent, a value that can be up and down and whatever, and then you just add them up as needed or calculate rates as needed.
Yep. We have Brian, who had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm in favor of handling in TSDB. I would do delta to cumulative conversion in TSDB. So not what Owen just said. I mean, I haven't thought about this deeply. Maybe it doesn't work, but that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I kind of echo the same thing. Like, this distributed system problem is a solved problem because all the samples of the same cities need to end up in the same ingester or whatever. So we just need to do the delta to cumulative at the ingesters. So I don't see the distributed system problem because I think it's a solved problem. Like, we already route all the samples in all these distributed systems. And I like the simplicity of starting off with actually ingesting cumulatives into TSDB and not changing the query engine at all. And this, I think, will get us to a workable solution that we can release and test and get feedback on. And I think there will be some use cases where this absolutely doesn't work, or we'll find some inefficiencies. And when we find those, I think we should then kind of plug the whole delta support all the way from like TSDB to query engine and all of this. But I like the fact that the simple solution, which is store cumulatives in TSDB. Yeah.
I'm slightly confused here because there's two different proposals. I'm also perfectly fine with the cumulative or the delta to cumulative conversion, but I'm still trying to understand why that's not a viable problem, a viable solution, because you can all even if you get multiple dimensions, you're getting different metrics with different cardinality. You can sum over those in PromQL, and that solves the summarization problem.
Bjorn?
I mean, disclaimers, I haven't really gotten to the bottom of all of this, but I understand more and more about it. And so far, I still stick to my original idea that it would be a mistake to convert a delta metric to cumulative, because the first thing we do with the cumulative metric, we apply rate to it to convert it back into delta, essentially, right? And there are a lot of problems with that. See the whole like rate discussion we have for the last 10 years or something. And I mean, there are many things bad about pushing deltas, but I think, again, disclaimer, I might miss something, but it feels to me the hard work of rating a counter has already been done. It has been done too early, which has problems, but now that it has been done, let's make use of it and let's just ingest the delta as a delta. Maybe with this, let's normalize it by the simple multiplication 2 per second, like if it's a 1 minute delta divided by 60, if it's a 2 minute delta divided by 120, stored as such. We all know it's a gauge, which is already a rate per second, and then we can act on it as usual. And if we want a rate that is not over 1 minute, but over 10 minutes, we do the usual average over time with the whole problem of changing frequencies. But that's a known problem, right? So it's not, we could work on this. It would also solve problems that we have anyway, but I don't really see the need to convert to cumulative. And I'm not even sure what like native support is supposed to change in that, right? Yeah.
Lots and lots of hands. I think Richie was first. Please just go by the order because I'm taking notes. Yeah.
I think Björn makes a very good point on the work already have been done, maybe wrongly, but still being done. My initial point was, if we convert, it seems we can get away with doing it relatively simplistic like Loki, where we just have a window, and if you send stuff in this window, it's taken into account, and if not, it's already flushed to disk. That was it.
Owen?
Yeah, I mean, basically, as far as doing accumulation in ingesters, there's issues with making sure that you have perfect synchrony of samples everywhere. So if order gets munged, then you're going to have different accumulations at different times, things like that. And also, you'd prefer your ingesters not to be stateful, and accumulation requires state. So like that starts to get into the specific implementation of the thing we're trying to keep abstract and not named. But that's the issues that are being dealt with.
I just want to add, finally, it makes sense why this is a distributed system problem, because, not all samples end up in every place every time. Yeah, okay, good.
But we don't have that problem in Prometheus because we have a single transactional time series database. I also see that it's fine to keep a delta record as is in the time series database. And so what we'd be having to do is, if somebody asks for rate function over a range vector, we would, under the hood, do the rate calculation just with the deltas and ignore, and they would just be transparent to the user whether it's a cumulative or a delta underlying time series. And I think that's also fine. I don't see a problem there. I just from a Prometheus perspective, we don't have the distributed problem.
All right. Wow, so many hands. Brian, you're next.
I think we do have an out of order problem, and many of the objections that are being raised involve that, and I hadn't thought about that, but I would quite possibly ban delta to cumulative conversion in the presence of out of order data. I mean, if you want out of order data, I think you have to store the deltas as is and do it the other way. But I would also like to appeal that we stop designing in the weeds in this meeting. I think we've established that there's a lot of interest and it needs a lot of thought, and that should go to another forum.
Yes, thank you, Brian. All right, so is there interest in exploring this? Yes. We need a design doc, basically laying out the two approaches, and then we discuss on the design doc.
There is a design
And
doc,
how-
right? It's linked right from the top of the issue.
I don't think it's ready to be consumed.
I
Is
think
it?
this,
Yeah, I think we should stop this discussion and come back when the design doc is ready.
Beyond?
no, I just want to say, I think the design doc is actually touching a lot of the different thoughts we have issued here. So
Okay.
it might be the umbrella design doc, and if you want to explore something in detail, it might be a child design doc, or it could be in that, I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna call for a quick consensus. Oh, wait, wrong highlighting. Consensus. Yes, we want to explore more on how to do delta to cumulative conversion. Done design down. Yes. Okay. Call for consensus. Yes, we want to explore more on how to do delta to cumulative. How to support deltas. Yeah. Support delta metrics in Prometheus. This should be done in a design doc. Do we have consensus on this? Any objections? All right. Cool. Any more 7 votes? 6 votes, 6 votes. Okay, we are in 6 votes. So the lowest one that has 6 votes is split all SDs into their own repositories. Do we have Kemal here? Does anyone else want to talk about splitting all service discoveries into their own repositories?
I mean, Simon did some initial work. See here? No, right? No, too bad.
That's all right. We have other topics that we can take. Bartek, wall versioning and forward compatibility strategy.
Cool. Yeah. Happy to discuss this. So, can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so there's this formal proposal I created a few months ago, and you can read it. It's recommendation for wall format changes. And to very quickly get you context, we are changing wall slightly. So we are a little bit adjusting native histogram records to support custom buckets. And initial idea was to kind of do it cleanly. So update existing records just to remove, just to not introduce any tech debt. However, that would be a breaking change. So we wanted to avoid that. And anyway, we solve it in a different way by creating tech debt, by creating new records that only relates to custom native histograms with custom buckets, one for integer, one for float. However, in ideal world, we could have much simpler wall format and only have one record for native histograms in general. So we did a quick hack, or like hack, well, kind of like a good work, but we would need to clean that up at some point. And that's why I created this doc, because we thought that we will have to break the compatibility early. There are other reasons, like we want to maybe adjust sample or metadata records for create timestamp. But generally, this is to kind of like improve our, like trust in and have a stable process for breaking changes in wall in wall format in general, right? And I'm not sure if we ever broke the wall format. We broke the TSDB format and compatibility, and that's where we bumped certain versions. And the same problem occurred as here. So essentially, there wasn't any kind of like formal process. We only have a trivial knowledge what to do. And like how I understand this, the general knowledge is that we introduce in a future. So we have, imagine, on the left, you have some Prometheus that supports certain version of the wall. And in the next version, we kind of like start by essentially supporting reading both old and new version, but not writing it. And then in the some release, maybe the next one on the right, you have something that by default writes a new version. And maybe reads, but it doesn't matter, because the problem is that when somebody rolls to the version, to the very newest version, and they kind of skipped the middle version, they can only revert to this middle version. And that can be a problem if there might be other breaking changes that make this generally new set of Prometheus is kind of not possible for them. They are kind of stuck to revert to a certain version, essentially. We did that a couple of times with TSDB. In fact, we did that with Prometheus 3.0. So when you go to 3.0 and all your data starts to write some blocks in the new format, we bumped certain versions. So you can only technically safely revert to 2.55. Anything before, you cannot read your indexes, right? So we kind of do those things hiddenly, and like people didn't complain. And I can agree that, this is a kind of edge case, because you have to really care about your data, which is not edge case. Like we want people to persist their data as a proper database in Prometheus. But, like they would have to have a certain problem, and they would need to revert to some other older Prometheus, which could be an edge case, right? And especially for wall, which is write ahead log, which probably lives only half an hour. So you would lose only half an hour of the data. So, or two, I guess, and there are edge cases as well here. So the long story short, this is a formal proposal that starts versioning the wall and actually proposes a certain flags that allows essentially writing in a certain wall version, and you can kind of decide. And we explicitly change the default at some point to write to the new version. So we moved into this write block, and I propose we have some discussion. I propose we could do that actually for LTS. So it's not like you switch to this block is one version after another, like one Prometheus after another. And we could do it a little bit safer and kind of like switch to a default writing format in the next LTS. So at least the long-term support version, you can revert to that long-term support version. So into like half a year old Prometheus or something, or a year old Prometheus. So it gives more room. So just very high level, that's it. I'm opening for discussion. Just to note, we don't need to rush it. Maybe it's too over careful. I want to get your opinion on those things, but it kind of like helps users for those revertibility cases, persistent cases. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we need a process. I absolutely love this process. Is this too cautious? I mean, I need to read it, but in general, I think we're going in the right direction. I don't know how many versions to support and LTS and stuff like that. Yeah. I like this. I like the direction of the proposal. That's kind of where, but I need to review the proposal thoroughly.
Yeah, has
Yeah, I was also going to say that I like it. When we introduced out of order, we introduced a new type of chunk, and we also had to do this magic of new world that knows how to read it, so that in the next version I can actually write and safely roll back to the previous one if there's an issue. But I cannot roll back to the one before because then I would lose my data. And I think you're finding the same problem with native histograms, probably. So versioned wall sounds like a good idea. I'm not entirely sure about the implementation, but like, I don't know, if this version fails to read, we can fall back to a more stable version and read that. Something like that sounds good.
maybe one mention is that what we can do with this proposal, and generally, is like every release we could kind of like mention what versions of certain like storage formats this Prometheus version supports and what you can revert to, right? That would be ideal if we could automate and improve that, for both pieces of TSDB and WAL. Yeah. Any other opinions? Any objections? Any statements that we shouldn't do that, or so? Ryan.
So yeah, I followed. I mean, I guess my question is, what is contentious about this? I mean, it seems obvious we need to version the thing. I saw there was a lot of debate, and I kind of zoned out after a few weeks. So where are we at?
I think we are in sort of consensus. I think it was Cryo that we discussed with generally. We were debating over this format, for example, like because there will be a moment where you have essentially two different wall versions, pieces of versions, and then we wanted to kind of establish, do we version per directories or we version per segment file, or each record should be a version, which is kind of a version right now. So I think we end up in the segment versioning, which gives you this nice overview of like what versions you have if you are just about to roll out to something that is not revertible. And that works for segments, and for TSDB we might have a different solutions, but yeah, this is what we are debating. And also another thing that is kind of, I guess, contentious is, for this, I want developers like Prometheus, devs to be kind of like okay and like to feel good, or like it would be super difficult to change format. Like we don't want to be stuck with like old things and make things really hard to maintain. So we want to also make the change velocity kind of like improving for development. So mandating LTS revertibility is kind of like scary. Like it will make people like avoid those changes. So it will increase the tech debt and problems. So that was kind of like the discussion. However, we kind of chatted that it's okay to backport, for example, ability to read a certain wall format if it's not super risky change to LTS. And that would kind of like improve this velocity. Although it's scary because like LTS should be stable, and now we are adding reading of like unknown format. It's is it okay? Not? Yeah, Brian.
Well, yeah, I was going to say I'm in favor of the thing that you should always be able to revert back to the last LTS version. But I'm just thinking about it. I mean, people who want the LTS guarantee are not going to upgrade to a. Yeah, so the corner case is when you go from the 2024 LTS to the 2025 LTS. You have to be able to go back to the 2024 LTS. So it's not about going from like 3.2 to 2.53. That's not a real requirement. But like when we do the next LTS, which is going to be 3.6 or something like that, you have to be able to go from 3.6 back to 2.53.
Yeah, and you cannot right now.
So I'm very firmly that that's a requirement. And whatever else we have to do to meet that requirement is just part of the job.
That's fair. Gotham.
I would agree with the same thing. LTS folks will upgrade to LTS versions. Yeah,
Okay, that feels like we then have to kind of develop something like that. Yeah, Cryo.
Yeah, I shared the same thing, and I already commented that I'm in favor of the LTS compatibility. And speaking as someone that's working on native histograms, LTS isn't a very long time frame, so it's fine.
Hey, I think we are good for consensus.
all right. You want to take a stab, Bartek?
Yeah, sure. So what? We want formal wall versioning process that allows LTS users to revert to the next LTS version, to the previous LTS version, with data persistent version. Sounds good. All right, so let's do it again. We want a formal wall versioning process that allows LTS users to revert to the previous LTS version with data persistence. Who wants that? Okay. Who objects? Yeah, I think we have that. Thank you.
I now see that Kamal has joined. And Kamal, do you want to take the splitting of service discovery into its own repose topic?
I can try. I wasn't prepared that much, but yeah, let's talk about it. I think there were a couple of initiatives and discussions previously happened to be able to like split this. I think we need to discuss a couple of other details and whether we would like to do this or not. I am also happy to somehow lead this and like do the grunt work basically. The one thing that I think we need to discuss is where to put these Prometheus community repo or the Prometheus org, like which org we need to put, or like what kind of prefix we would like to use. ST is enough, or do we want variables and service discovery? Yeah, those sort of details. Please go ahead, Gautam.
I am not familiar with the previous discussions. Why can't all the SD packages be in the same repo? Why do we need like one repo per SD package?
I think one thing keep coming up is about like having some maintainers dedicated to repos and to make sure that everyone like who to basically talk to if something is broken in those libraries. And
Go for it. Sorry, go for it. Yeah.
And I think the other one to just to like follow up the changes of these things in a contained manner, right? Like maybe nothing has changed and like you are just like bumping if whether one of the service discovery modules is changing and version control them separately. Yeah, best practices, and I think having some ownership around the service discovery components. Bjorn might have more context on that. I think he's one of the previous people that suggested that.
I mean, I didn't actually suggest that, but it might be a good idea. I mean, the problem we had is we have those, I don't know, 100 plus minus service discoveries, and they are essentially all badly maintained, which is, yeah, I mean, I guess Julian was like doing a lot there, but he's not doing a lot right now. On the other hand, we have sometimes people showing up and saying, yeah, we would like Alibaba people show up or Amazon people, we would like to help. But then if we make them maintainers, we essentially all have to make them Prometheus maintainers, right? And I guess it's also a permissions thing, like everything what Kemal said. But then there's a permissions thing where we can just say, this is now your repo. You have access to exactly this repo, which in the old governance wouldn't actually work if you put it in Prometheus, but the new governance perfectly supports that. And then it's also like, yeah, sense of ownership. I mean, that was already said, I guess. But we could actually, and then we also have this thing, right? I mean, I think we tried for years to get somebody from Microsoft to look at the Azure stuff with like mixed success. But if we give them the repo and say, this is your repo, you can apply your own coding procedures to it, whatever, you just give it to a bunch of your engineers, maybe that helps, right? That would be the help. That would be the hope here.
I just want to add, I've been coming across repos where each folder is like a submodule that has its own releases. And also, like, we can have like a maintainer.md, which is what we have with Prometheus. Prometheus saying this folder is kind of maintained by this person. And also code owners, so that, whenever something changes in that folder, like, the right people are tagged and stuff. I feel like that's better than having 100 SD repos. It's kind of scary to have all those repos and then basically bumping and like pulling in docs from like 100 repos and generating the website. It's just going to, I not very comfortable with this whole thing. Yeah.
Can I go?
Yeah, go for it.
I think like the only problem I see with this nested modules things, even though like the experience evolved since the beginning of the Go modules are introduced, I still don't like having nested repos and maintaining that in a single repo context. I find it a little bit cumbersome. But I also understand your point, having a lot of repos is also a problem. But then we don't need to pull all these like change logs to the main repo, right? It's just another dependency update. Like if you want to check if something changes in the service discovery, you can go to that repo and check the change log in that repo.
Beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the confusing part, I mean, we need to decouple things mirroring reality, right? And then I think it's least confusing. And I mean, this is not the case right now, but imagine we get like a bunch of Microsoft Azure people working on their service discovery, and they want to use their own release cycles, practices, whatever. Then it would make sense to put it into an extra repo because that's the boundary we have in reality with different, I don't know, could be even a different style guide, different build pipeline, I don't know what, right? And that would make sense, I think, provided we find that. But on the other hand, I also don't think that we will ever manage to have like proper maintainership just within the Prometheus community, given how many we have. And I see this in Boxcrops, right? We sit there and who knows about whatever service discovery, like we are really puzzled, and then we don't even know whom to ping. It's a really bad situation. So maybe we have to do something like that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it maybe make sense to make use of either approach or both approaches rather? Who says we can't maintain some service discoveries in a monorepo with like subfolders, and if others are better maintained in a separate repo, then they get split out into a separate repo. As long as we have the processes in place and everybody has an idea how this works, then we can have both.
I like that. And I have a preference of keeping it inside the Prometheus org and not Prometheus community, because if you're building these into Prometheus server and releasing them, I don't think I want the artifacts to be living inside the Prometheus org and not Prometheus community. Ben, do you have any thoughts on this? You maintain a lot of the CI stuff and also Prometheus community.
This many repos is a nightmare.
Let's start with one and then basically split off if there's enough activity in one. I think if there's like super low activity in most SDs, maybe we just keep them in this bigger. Yeah.
Somebody needs to work on Renovate to keep all this stuff up to date, because we don't. I don't know too much. It's already bad enough that every exporter has a repo, and those all have to be updated, and Promu configs and Go modules and CI pipelines and yeah. How many repos do we have? And how many people actually update their repos? I think maybe 5 people maintain all of the repos in general. I know Bjorn merges his stuff.
But I mean, that's the point. If that's the situation, 5 people maintain 100 repos, then yeah, that's bad, right? But if we actually, I mean, imagine a world where we have a Microsoft team maintaining Azure and an AWS team maintaining AWS and so on, then we have 50 people maintaining one repo, right? That's also a nightmare. So that's what I mean by we have to model reality into the repo structure, right? And yeah, I mean, that means probably shouldn't now split it up into 100 repos, but maybe we should have the option of, like, if the Microsoft person says, yeah, I could do this if I have my own repo, then we make them their own repo or something. Maybe that would work.
I am open to that. Jan?
Yeah, sounds like default to monorepo and split out if needed is the way to go. But also, speaking from experience, should we perhaps also, that might be a different topic, but should we maybe also look at sort of these maintenance tasks, automating these maintenance tasks a little more? Like, updating Promu configs and things like that. That seems low-hanging fruit for automation.
Amal?
Okay, I found the button. So, am I hearing this correctly? So we want the submodules in like a single repo format, or we don't even want to do that as well?
No, we want that. And if somebody comes along and wants more ownership or wants a split repo, we are happy to give it to them. That is, I think, what we are leaning towards. All right. Let me write the consensus.
I mean, does that mean if we now have a person, let's say somebody from company X, we have never heard about them, but they're telling us, I'm from company X and I want to maintain the X service discovery. Do we just give them maintainership in the Prometheus repo so they maintain the code if they're willing to do so? Are we fine with that situation where we essentially give person that haven't built a reputation within the community and give them maintainership because they work for the company that, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
People go for it. I'm gonna take notes.
Maybe this could be a useful thing for the hybrid approach, right? If this is the case, we can have a separate repo and they can be the maintainer of that repo for that small thing as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be for a thing like Microsoft Service Discovery.
I'd say yes. It's perfectly fine to give outside contributors access to Prometheus. This is what code owners does. We do this for Helm charts. There's a well-maintained structure of people who maintain all the different Helm charts. There's, I think, 30 of them. And each Helm chart has a explicit list of owners, and they just use the approval process that GitHub provides to allow a huge number of contributors to maintain that repo. It's constantly moving, and I don't know if anybody in this room besides me even watches the Helm charts repo.
I mean, honestly, I would be completely fine with it. I just don't want to give people access who have not contributed to merge random PRs, but I am more than okay if they're only kind of allowed to approve and merge PRs for just those repos. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe it's not a concern. I don't know.
It's basically completely possible in code owners. That
Okay.
we'd have to be more strict, and we'd have to enable requires code owner approval, but I think we've already done that recently.
I don't think so. I think I'm a no code owners file and still merge and approve.
You might be in the top level team and your admin.
Okay. So if you're like GitHub org owner, you can do it. But if you're just a member, then you need, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, if you can model this with GitHub permissions, I think that's fine. Then the consensus would be, yes, we welcome quote unquote random people maintaining service discoveries. We give them access via code owners. And if people really want full ownership and it helps them, they can also have their own repo within the Prometheus org, but only if they really need that, essentially.
Yeah, 1 second. Maybe we need 3 consensus here. Let me do this. We open to shooting off a service discovery into its own repo if it's active maintainers request. So, okay. Before I start reading out the consensus, anybody want to make any edits? All right. Okay, first one. We do not want to split service discovery into separate repos by default. Do we have consensus on this? Right. The second consensus, we are okay giving external contributors access to maintaining the service discovery with code owners functionality.
Can we make it a little bit more specific? Like they're assigned service discovery or something?
Wait, access to maintaining Prometheus by giving them code ownership over just service discovery through. I don't know.
I mean, we don't even need the implementation detail here, right? We need something like they get access to their own service discovery.
Okay. Does this consensus make sense? We are okay giving external contributors access to maintaining Prometheus by giving them code ownership over specific service discovery parts.
That still sounds like they get access to all of Prometheus.
Right, okay. External
So
contributors access to. Yeah, go for it, Bjorn. Or Richie. Uh, code only. Richie, which one do you prefer? I mean, I mean, both of them should work. Beyonce is a little bit more specific, I think. So I'm gonna go with that unless you have concerns. All right, let's go with that. We are okay letting external contributors maintain the service discovery within Prometheus by granting access to the related code only. Any concerns? All right, no concerns. Final consensus, we are open to splitting off service discovery into its own repo if it's active maintainers request so. All right, cool. We are right on time, folks. Thank you. Please put more topics over the course of the next month and see you all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.